What's good, y'all? Welcome back to another week of REVOLT Sports Weekly. I'm your host, Mariah Rose, and today we are going to get into all of the craziest sports stories of the week. And apologies, question mark, wrapping up March Madness, the NBA, the MVP awards, the playoffs, all of the things. But I have a great guest here for you today. Let's welcome in Kazeem Famuyide. He is an Emmy Award-winning host. He is a host on Mornings with Miro, Hot 97, and a co-host of 7 p.m. in Brooklyn, the Ringler Wrestling Show, and the Say Less podcast. Welcome to the show, Kaz.
I'm happy to be here, Mariah. Thank you for having me. Big fan of your work, and there's a lot to talk about, so I'm excited to be here. Thank you.
I mean, I feel like the warmer it gets outside, the more it's like, what is going on in the sports world? There's so much happening. First, let's start with March Madness wrapping up, because we had some good and some not so good, but good outcome championship games. Men's March Madness ended with Michigan winning their second NCAA title, defeating UConn 69-63. And women's March Madness ended with UCLA winning their first title in NCAA Division I for women's basketball. Now, give me your take on these championship games. Did you catch them?
Yeah, usually when I do my brackets, I try to throw in a couple of underdogs. I try to just close my eyes and throw a dartboard and see all right, one of these teams that nobody expects to win is going to win something, right? But not this year. This year really felt like the year of the heavy favorites. And I know college basketball and college sports in general has changed so much with the implementation of name, image, and likeness and just big business. So a lot of these massive programs with massive endowments and money to spend, we're probably going to see a lot less of these plucky underdog schools going to the Sweet 16s and Elite Eights and, upsetting teams along the way, because, those damn near every single team that made it to the Elite Eight and Final Four was a top 1 or 2 seed from a blue blood program. So, UConn felt like they were on the precipice of a dynasty, you know what I mean? Dan Hurley getting into the referee's face and going nose to nose, that was an incredible moment. But shout out to Michigan, man. Not just because of how well they played, but your pops in the Fab Five and seeing everybody out there, together, not just on the court, but doing the simulcast during the games and stuff. If you grew up watching college basketball, the Fab Five was absolutely a team that meant so much to the culture. So it was just really dope seeing them all together and watching Michigan win the national championship. So shout out to them. On the women's side, however, it felt like it was UConn versus the field, right? And, UConn is always going to be in the mix as long as Geno Auriemma is over there. You got AZ Fudd, you got Sarah, you got, one of the most elite programs in all of basketball. And it almost kind of was put in a damper because of what happened with Coach Staley and Coach Auriemma, on that sideline. And shout out to Coach Dawn, man, because she don't play around with nobody. Talk about she'll whoop Geno's ass, and I believe her. You know what I'm saying? Geno's a little up there in age, you know what I'm saying? He was the first one to apologize. He copped the plea immediately. And Dawn Staley does not mess around. So shout out to the Gamecocks, but also big shout outs to UCLA and capturing their first ever national championship, man. I think it's great for the program, great for the city, and great for women's basketball in general. That conference and UCLA winning the national championship, my eyes immediately go to USC and that rivalry and how USC is going to look next year with Juju and oh my gosh, I'm forgetting homegirl's name. Oh my goodness, it's escaping me. USC is going to be loaded next year with some incredible talent. So seeing the battle between USC and UCLA, especially as national champions, is going to be very, very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, the season was very interesting. College basketball this year, from Geno and Dawn on the sideline to what you mentioned earlier, was the whole NIL transfer portal of it all. It's starting to feel very like the G League. Like it's a professional league and people are requesting trades. Michigan won the championship with 5 transfers starting. A lot of people had mixed feelings about this. What do you think about the landscape of college basketball today as far as NIL and the transfer portal are concerned?
As far as my conscience is concerned, I love it, right? Because I love college basketball, but there were so many years I'd watch the March Madness tournament and see all of these sponsors and all of this sneaker money and all of this bread just being tossed around from people to people. And it's just like, man, it would certainly be nice if the players involved in this was at least getting a part of this check. So at least, as crazy as the transfer portal and NIL is, I could sleep well at night knowing that these kids are being taken care of. And if this is as good as it gets, if college basketball is where it peaks, a lot of these top college basketball players are at least heading into the real world with some money to take care of their family, to look out for their future, and all off the strength of being able to be a great athlete. So I think that's good. But as an actual fan of, like, say, a big university, if you're a big UCLA fan, or you went to UCLA or you went to Michigan, and before the season's even over, you're already hearing about some of your top players entering the transfer portal or heading into the league and all this type of stuff. We watched this game under the guise of amateur athletics, but let's all be real. This has not been amateur athletics for a very, very long time, where the money was being thrown under the table, where the promises were being made between coaches that weren't necessarily being out there in the open. At least now it's all out there, and now we can treat it like we want it to be treated. I know we call them student athletes, but there's a lot more emphasis on the athlete than the student. And when you're bringing in that much money, especially if you play college football or basketball, I think you should be treated accordingly. We see it a lot in other sports for the longest time, especially individual sports, tennis, golf, the Olympics. Like, a lot of these incredible athletes are able to go pro when they're ready and still maintain their college eligibility. So I think it's dope that, these kids that have brought so much money and attention and just, clout to a lot of these universities are properly being taken care of. So I'm one of those folks who kind of like the NIL era, man. I don't mind it. Treat them like pros, pay them like pros.
Right. I agree. I think people group in issues that come with NIL and the players getting paid with issues that come from the transfer portal. And I think that those things can be mutually exclusive. Like, I think the issues that come with players getting to go from school to school whenever they feel like it and not have to sit out like they used to, that I have a little bit of an issue with. Like, I feel like there should be some sort of situation where, I mean, there's not contracts being signed. It's just like, if I want to leave, I'm up and leaving. And it kind of creates a mess. And it's hard to follow storylines, right? When everyone is just jumping from school to school. But the players getting paid is a whole other situation. I think it's a little bit of a mess, but it's also new. So we're going to get used to it as time goes by.
You got to break some eggs to make an omelet.
Yes,
I get it. You know what I mean?
exactly.
Like, it's not going to be perfect out the rip, but I like the idea of what they're doing.
Exactly. I like the idea of it, and I think that they'll get it figured out. Let's get into the second part of what you said, and that was Geno Auriemma and Dawn Staley's interaction at the end of the Final Four when South Carolina upset UConn. It was crazy. I remember watching it and I was like, what is Geno doing? Like, what is going on? He definitely got out of character in that moment. He released a first apology where he didn't mention Dawn Staley's name and apologized to the staff and team at South Carolina. Dawn very much, handled it with class, brushed it off, and focusing on the national championship. They got dog walked, for lack of a better word, in the national championship. And then Geno releases an apology this week. I lost myself, et cetera, et cetera. Put on your PR hat, right? What was that? The whole apologizing the first time, not mentioning it. Was that a lapse of judgment? Was that him just not caring?
I don't know, man, because, like, I think I have a ton of respect for Geno Auriemma, man, and everything he's built. And obviously, Coach Staley, he's had, when you think of Geno Auriemma, you think of these incredible rivalries he's had with, like, these great coaches. You think of Pat Summitt, you know what I mean? You think of the coach down in LSU. You think of Coach Staley. And there's all these unwritten rules of sportsmanship that, like, sometimes they pick and choose when they want to enforce it, right? Like, how many times have we seen a blowout happening in the NBA? Somebody goes to get a dunk, and that's when somebody wants to go in and give a hard foul, like, hey, you're not supposed to do that, and blah, blah, blah. Geno kind of got tight because allegedly he didn't, Coach Staley didn't come out for a handshake, or it took too long to come out for a handshake in the middle of the court or whatever. And I just think he was just a little upset that his team didn't win. You know what I mean? Like, I think if UConn would have won and he had to go over there and shake Coach Staley's hand. I'm willing to bet the last thing on his mind would be, oh, she made me wait like 3 minutes or however long it took to go shake her hand, before the game started. And, Geno Auriemma, with this team that he's had some incredibly historically great teams. And this team was one of them that was on the way to possibly being another one of those historic teams. So I think in the moment, it all just kind of hit him. And he was just a very emotional man at that point. And this is the point where a lot of the women fans and the women's sports look at us and be like, see, we're always talking about women being too emotional in a lot of these instances. Look what happens when this grown-ass man doesn't get his way, you know what I'm saying, who has accomplished everything you can accomplish in women's basketball. So I think it was just a lapse in judgment. There's nothing to crucify him over, you know what I'm saying. Geno Auriemma has forgot more about basketball than most people will ever learn, and he's a hell of a competitor. So he owned it. He set the apology out. I'm sure the next time USC and UConn link up, it's gonna be a story. So I think we should all just move on, and if they don't want to move on, let Staley get some hands on him. I don't know. She said she could beat his ass. Let's see if she could beat his ass for real. You know what I mean?
Dawn definitely said, let's all move forward and move past this and focus on the growth of women's basketball and allow that to be the story that we tell when it comes to the season. So I am going to listen to Dawn and we are going to move on from it. But I definitely think if you have to apologize twice, I'm side-eyeing for sure. But let's transition into the NBA because much to get into here. I mean, from the playoffs coming up, the seeding in the East is crazy. The West is all locked up. Everyone who's clinched has clinched. The play-in is coming up. But there is just the name on everyone's lips is this 65-game rule. Now, if you guys don't know what we're talking about, the 65-game rule basically states that an NBA player has to play in at least 65 regular season games to be eligible for postseason awards, which includes MVP, Most Improved Player, Sixth Man of the Year, and All NBA honors. There's been a lot of controversy over this rule. I have to know, do you think that this rule is a good thing or it needs to be amended?
The rule was implemented in good faith, right? Like there were a lot of players, there were a lot of coaches and teams that were load managing, that were letting players sit out for certain games that were marquee games for the NBA. Like we got to remember why this 65-game rule was put into effect. There was a lot of players that were on ABC games or ESPN games or marquee games that were just sitting out because it was the second game of a back-to-back, because there was certain rest being, implemented to certain players. Like it wasn't to punish players that are actually trying to play in these games. You know what I mean? Luka Doncic is a perfect example. He's right on the cusp of that 65-game rule, and he's about to have another child, you know what I mean? And he has to fly back home to, witness the birth of his child. And because of that, he's going to make himself ineligible for all NBA, which he would clearly make in any year.
Okay.
He's going to be ineligible for MVP, which he would make in any year,
Okay.
It's weird.
I have to stop you there on the Luka point because what Kaz is referring to is Luka being a game away from postseason award eligibility because he got injured, right? And I will say that had Luka not been suspended for getting too many texts, he would be eligible for postseason awards. So I find it interesting that the story has become, well, he was at the birth of his child. How could a father miss? Well, Luka, if we're being technical here, technical, no pun intended, you did miss a game just recently because you were suspended for too many texts because you're cussing out the refs and you're crying at the refs and whatever. Everyone knows this about Luka and Luka's game. Had that not been the case, Luka would have gotten his injury, he would have played 65 games, and he would have been eligible. So I just had to stop you there because
I'm a victim of LAPR, okay? Like I got caught up in the child and everything. I'm like, oh, poor Luka, what are we doing? But I understand the nature of the rule. The nature of the rule is to have the best players playing in the biggest games that all of the fans that want to see. You know what I mean? And I think having that cusp of 65 games, or that threshold of 65 games, was to keep these players active and interested throughout the season. There's lulls throughout this regular season. It's a long season. and it could get boring, and you have to have some sort of incentive to keep these players interested in January when people can't wait to get to All-Star weekend, in March when some teams are starting to tank and they want to play good basketball leading into the playoffs. So that being said, man, like there's so many players that that probably won't be all NBA this year, and I think it's going to lead to some changes with that rule. Cade Cunningham being another, prime example, somebody who was having a career season, who was clearly in the MVP race before he had this collapsed lung, and it almost seems like a punishment and not an encouragement to keep people playing. So I don't know how they fix it. I think they could, probably use a little bit better judgment when it comes to the folks who have set out these games. But yeah, man, it's we don't want these end of the year awards to be participation awards of guys who are just the last people left. We want the best players, the people who meant the most to their team, to be properly rewarded. And on the player side, a lot of these are financially incentivized too. You make all NBA, you get all defensive player of the year, all that type of stuff. You get more zeros in your bank account. So I think they're all going to figure out a way to make it all work. And, maybe this year's not the best example, but hopefully next year they tweak that rule just a little bit.
Right. I think all NBA being grouped into this whole situation is where it gets messy, because it's unfortunate you don't play in 65 games, and these are people that were trying to play in the games. Even Luka, I mentioned his tech situation, which is unfortunate, and I think takes him out of the argument. But somebody like Cade, he was trying in a game and collapsed his lung. Like that's not his fault, and he shouldn't be punished for that. Especially, maybe he's not the MVP, right? But he should still be able to make all NBA honors. My question to you is, so you mentioned keeping players interested and locked in throughout the duration of an 82-game season, right? Do you think that there is a world in which shortening the schedule could benefit the NBA in that way?
Not going to happen, Mariah. You know why? Because they got so much bread on the line. They just signed 3 new TV deals, which is going to shoot everybody, the salary cap and how much money all these players can make, into the stratosphere, and everybody can have all these conversations about, keeping people interested throughout the season. Once you start talking about saying, well, we're going to take away about like $700,000 from your paycheck, I think that tune changes like rather quickly. You know what I'm saying? So, I don't think shortening the season is the way to do it. I think we just need like a board, like a judgment call where it's like we could tell the difference between a Cade Cunningham who is diving for a loose ball and a player falls on his ribs, as opposed to a player who is rehabilitating or isn't necessarily 100%, or, like there has to be some sort of judgment between like an injured rule and a hurt rule. And, if you played sports growing up, anybody listening to this who played sports growing up, I'm sure one day your coach has told you there's a difference between playing injured and playing hurt. If you're injured, you sit out, you don't even suit up. You don't even sit on the bench. Like, you just do your best to support your team in that way. If you hurt, you tape it up, you lick your wounds, and you get out there and you give it your best shot. You know what I mean? If you could give them 5 minutes, 10 minutes, we've seen instances in basketball where like some of the best players who couldn't give them their all, but just the emotional weight of being able to give 5 to 10 minutes to your team because you're a leader of a team, I think that actually plays into an MVP vote. Like, that makes you a valuable player. Just being on the court emotionally can lift up teams, and players that may not have been, ready to contribute in a way, ends up contributing in a way, knowing that their best players suited up when they weren't necessarily 100%. So I think maybe there needs to be a committee to sort of like figure out the difference between the injuries and the hurt and just plain old sitting out, just so we can figure out exactly how to differentiate who truly is the most valuable player, who truly deserves to be an all-NBA player, and eventually who truly deserves these financial incentives, as being one of the top players in the league.
Now, you mentioned who is the most valuable player in the league, right? The MVP race has been such a conversation throughout the season. You've got names like Jaylen Brown in the race, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, of course, Nikola Jokic, Luka Doncic was in there for a little bit, Victor Wembanyama making a case for himself. What is your take on the MVP race this year?
I'm a big proponent of words meaning things. And when you're the most valuable player on the basketball team, I put a lot of emphasis on the word valuable. And a lot of times it feels like the MVP is just going to the best player on the best team, you know? And if we're going that way, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander probably has an opportunity to win it again. But you can't tell me a 7'5" dude who does completely disrupts an entire team's offense just by being on the court and is also an offensive force on the other side and has beaten the number one team in the NBA 3 times out of 4 and is a game behind you in, you know, the records. There's nobody more valuable in the league than Victor Wembanyama. You know what I mean? Like, he is a player who, you know, sometimes I guess, you know, there's this thing called voters fatigue where they're like, oh, he'll have plenty of chances to win, you know, years down the line. And you look at a guy like Jokic who like is averaging another triple-double and you're kind of yawning at it. It was like, oh, you know, you sort of kind of take it for granted in that type of way. A guy like Wemby, you don't want to wait to give the guy the flowers he deserves. The Spurs are way ahead of schedule as far as being a real contender in the NBA this year. And when you're taking the defending champions and you got their number, and on top of that, the word valuable, he averages nearly 4 to 5 blocks a game, and he probably affects 10 more shots than that. You know, like this, he affects the game in a way that truly cannot be quantified by numbers. You look at it and you line up all the contestants, and he's around maybe like 24 points, 10 rebounds, like 4 blocks, 4 assists, nothing crazy. Doesn't stand up to the Luka numbers, the Jokic numbers, and even the SGA numbers. But anybody who has 2 eyeballs and knows the game knows when that dude is on the court, they have a chance to win every single time, just him being there. So my personal vote, I'm giving it to Wemby, but it wouldn't shock me if SGA gets it again if the Thunder win out and they continue to be the number one team in the NBA.
I agree. My take on it was I've seen the Thunder play without SGA, and it's not that he's not valuable. It's just that, like, they're a good team. They're a good team all around. Like, that team was put together very, very well. And I think people overcomplicate it, to be honest. What you were saying is exactly how I feel about it. When you watch the games, Victor Wembanyama is clearly the most valuable player in the league. Like, when you're watching, he's in a league of his own compared to everybody else.
There's no player like him.
No.
We've never seen a player like him. We've never seen a player that affects both sides of the court the way he affects both sides of the court. And it's scary that he's still kind of just scratching the surface on how dominant he can be. It's like somebody got in his ear this year and was like, it's nice that you could shoot threes. It's nice we can handle the ball. We need your ass dunking it every single time and blocking shots every single time. And if you get a little 3 here and there, cool. But get your ass in the paint and dominate. And he listened, and he's been unbelievable for the Spurs so far. And when you want to talk about value, you think of a guy like De'Aaron Fox, who's a great guard for Sacramento. Like, I think there's value in being an attractive player to play with. Like, you know, SGA was traded to the Oklahoma City Thunder. They also had a gaggle of draft picks who have all, I mean, granted, big shout out to Sam Presti, who's put together a hell of a team, but like, it's rare to hit on that many lottery picks every single year with Chet Holmgren and Jalen Williams, both of the Jalen Williamses, and now you got Cason Wallace that's coming up out of there, and you know, Isaiah Hartenstein. Like, they built a hell of a team, but they're pretty decent without SGA. I don't know what the Spurs look like without Victor Wembanyama. They're maybe a play-in team with Victor Wembanyama, but with him on the court, they have an opportunity to win the championship, and I think that's where the value lives and dies.
And I think Nikola Jokic is suffering from the voters fatigue situation. I mean, that's what happens when we have the media, people like us, voting on these awards, the storylines and the history.
Nobody wants to have those uncomfortable conversations about Jokic if he gets a 4th MVP award. I think that's a big thing.
Because when you look
put
at
him
the
in
awards,
that room,
yes, it's the history of the game.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
if
You
he's a
put him in
four-time
that room
MVP,
of guys who have won 4 MVPs. I mean, you're talking about the Jordans, the LeBrons, the Magics, like those type of people. And folks are like, the eye test, it doesn't do it for me. Yeah, this triple-double does, though.
right. And then when you
So,
go back in the history books of the game and you look at people like I was about to say LeBron, but he is still very much active. But you look at
yes.
those people, they could have won the MVP more times than they did and didn't because of voter fatigue. So it kind of spirals into like, okay, now 4 is like this mark that we like can't give Jokic when it's like we don't want to give LeBron more and we don't going to give Jordan it every year. You know, it
Yeah,
becomes a mess. I
yeah.
think just we overcomplicate it. Who is the most valuable player in the league? Vote for them. You know, I don't know.
Mhm. That's a fact. I think Shaq was the biggest victim of voter fatigue. Like he literally was the most valuable player in basketball every single year he was a member of the Lakers. And then one day they were just like, I think one MVP is enough. You know what I mean? It just kept it going. But yeah, nobody's more valuable than him. For sure.
Yeah, there'll be flaws. People are voting on it, but let's get
Mhm.
into these playoffs because it doesn't
Okay.
have anything to do with these postseason awards, but it definitely has us looking at who won the awards. Like, do we regret picking that person? I wonder if we're gonna have that feeling this year. So the regular season is coming to an end. It ends on Sunday, April 12th, and the playing games are from April 14th to April 17th, and the playoffs start on April 18th. The Western Conference teams have all clinched playoffs or play-in berth, but the Eastern Conference teams only have 4 teams clinched, and Miami in the play-in. Seeds 5 through 9 are they're like tied, pretty much. So all games until Sunday matter. I have, as someone from Atlanta, I'm a Hawks fan, I'm a Georgia fan, I support my Georgia teams down. I am stressed out and confused. We've got this whole situation where the Cavs are wanting to play the Pistons on purpose, just so much drama. But what are you keeping your eyes on as far as these playoffs are concerned?
I mean, the noise about the Eastern Conference being the leastern conference is way overblown. I feel like the teams that are on the bottom half of that play-in schedule are all very dangerous teams. You know what I mean? Like the Charlotte Hornets have been playing unbelievable basketball. The Atlanta Hawks that you just mentioned, they traded Trae Young and they got taller, longer, more athletic, and now they got CJ McCollum, who is a certified bucket at the end of the game. They're a dangerous team. The Orlando Magic have been up and down all year long, but when you got Paolo Banchero, you got the Wagners, you know what I mean? You got Desmond Bane, who's been there a lot with the Memphis Grizzlies. You can't really count them out. And you got the Philadelphia 76ers, which you know, on paper, if they're healthy, they're probably the fakest 7th seed we've ever seen. Like, that's a team that could be a top 1 seed if Embiid, Maxey, Paul George, and VJ Edgecombe are all on the court. So I have a hard time believing like the top 4 seeds or the top whatever seeds in the Eastern Conference all get out the first round unscathed. I think one of those teams gets upset in the first round by one of these hot teams in the second half of the year. And on the Western Conference too, you know, same thing. And there's been so much talk about tanking and what the bottom half of the league is doing to position themselves into lottery position. Like you said, it's the last week of the year and these games are still mattering. It's almost like the playoffs started maybe like a week or two early because everybody's sort of jockeying for position. Last night, just up the street at Madison Square Garden, the Knicks and the Celtics were playing each other. And I've been in that building for many, many playoff games, and you couldn't tell me it wasn't a playoff game in there. You know, the Knicks want to be in that 3 to 2 seed mix. When it's Knicks and Boston, it's always going to be a little bit chippy between those two teams, especially going off of last year's playoffs. But, it's going to be a very, very tough battle in the Eastern Conference. The Pistons have had a great season, and they're going to be a top seed, and they just got Cade Cunningham back. But they're also still very young, and they've never won a playoff series before. So it's like anything could really happen in the East. I think the West, no disrespect to any team in the West, it just still feels like a 2-team race out there. It feels like Oklahoma City and San Antonio, and you can't count out Jokic and the Nuggets because they have Jokic, and he's unbelievable. But it does feel like a 2-team race in the Western Conference. The East, I really think anything could happen between those 1 and 5 seeds. And I think one of those bottom seeds, the 6 between the 10, is going to upset somebody. So if I'm Cleveland, if I'm Boston, if I'm the Knicks, If I'm Detroit, I'm not thinking that first round is a cakewalk. I think you're going to be in a battle with somebody who is hungry, who's played great basketball after the All-Star break, and has little to nothing to lose as far as like getting in there and upsetting the team. So I can't wait till these games start mattering, and it feels like they've mattered earlier than ever because of the play-in and because of how deep a lot of these teams have become.
I completely agree about a lower seeded team on the East. Put my Atlanta bias aside, but a lower seeded team on the East is definitely going to upset somebody. And if I had to place my bet, I think it would be Cleveland. Tanking sort of in the playoff race, whatever they're trying to do, messing with the playoff gods and being like, we're sitting 3 starters. I believe they're playing Atlanta tonight, and they're sitting 3 starters because they want to be in position to play Detroit, which I think that puts you in a bad position because you're asking to play Detroit. They're not going to like that. And you get into a long series as Cleveland. I'm sorry. I was born at night, not last night. James Harden. I don't entirely know if I get to a game 6 or game 7, I'm going to be like, I'm not saying he's not a great player, but we've seen this film before, and these are going to be some long series. So if I had to place my bet on anyone, I think it would be Cleveland. What about you though? How are you feeling about this Boston, New York? Because Jason Tatum coming back had a lot of people looking at Boston like they're the team to beat, but now it's just a mess.
Yeah, Boston's been a lot better than I think a lot of people expected this season. They've been calling it a gap year, which I think is whack. I think,
it was very much not that.
Year sounds like it sounds like a built-in excuse, you know what I mean? Because Tatum's back. He's looked just as good as he did before he got injured. And Jaylen Brown's been playing at an MVP level. However, when they won their championship, they didn't go through the Knicks. And last year, when they went up against the Knicks, they got sent home. Granted, Jason Tatum did get hurt towards the end of that game 5, I want to say. But the Knicks looked like they were in control anyway. Like, they stole 2 games in Boston, and it felt like they had control of that series the entire time. So just in any sport, whether it's basketball, baseball, boxing, whoever, you put a guy from New York and a guy from Boston against each other, there's going to be some bad blood. And the way the seedings are set up with Boston probably locked in at the 2 seed, the Knicks probably locked up at the 3 seed, that's a pretty probable rematch of the 2025 playoffs of meeting in the second round once again. And if you're Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, you want that matchup. If you're the New York Knicks, you probably want that matchup too. You probably feel pretty good about it. You went 3-1 against them this season. And even though Jason Tatum is back, you've shown that you could handle him at his best last year, even before the Achilles injury. So you have your Atlanta bias. I have my New York bias. I like my matchup against the Boston Celtics, all right? Like, I like seeing New York going into Boston and shutting Boston up like they did last year. Not once, but twice.
And the Knicks are built to beat the Celtics. That's like the so you're on a Mac. The Knicks are built to beat the Celtics with their wing defenders, and I think that they can very much do it. I also think one interesting thing about the NBA, yes, it's a 7-game series and the best team usually is going to win. I think a lot of times it's also the teams that we're not quite paying attention to or talking about end up in those top positions, like the Pacers the last couple of years. No one was checking for the Pacers all season long, and then every playoffs, it's like the Pacers come out of nowhere, and then that year Luka took the Mavs to the finals. It's always something unexpected. We're always like, oh, it's going to be these 2 teams, and then you never know, which brings me to my final question. Everyone hates when I ask them this one, but I have to know, if you had to choose today, who is in your NBA finals and who is your NBA champion?
The same, if you could believe it or not, we could find the video. I forgot where I shot it from, but the same prediction I had at the beginning of the year is the same prediction I have this year. I have the San Antonio Spurs coming out the West, and I have the New York Knicks coming out the East in the Knicks-Spurs finals. And I truly believe Knicks in 26 has been the mantra. I think this is the year the New York Knicks do it. They would have to go up against the Spurs. I don't like the Knicks matchup against the Oklahoma City Thunder. They just never really quite figured them out. But the Spurs, I like their matchup against. And the Knicks specifically are so built for the playoffs. They kind of been battle tested the last couple of years. And when the game slows down and you got number 11 on your team with the ball in his hand in crunch time, I trust him with the nuclear codes. Like, he is somebody who it doesn't matter how far down we are. If he has the ball in his hand and it's a 1-possession game, 2-possession game, I like my chances. On top of that, Karl-Anthony Towns is rebounding better than he's ever been. I think he's leading the league in rebounds. And the Knicks have a bench. Their big Achilles heel last year, as great as they were last season with Tom Thibodeau at the helm, was that they just didn't play enough people. And this year, they are deeper than ever. Jordan Clarkson's been great. Deuce McBride has been great. Mitchell Robinson is probably the most important role player in the NBA, just with how many extra possessions he gets the Knicks on the offensive glass and just playing defense and getting them out to get easy buckets. They have a team that is built for the postseason. So I like the Pistons. The Pistons have had a great season. The Celtics have had a great season. Who is the team that sent them both home last year? The New York Knicks. I think the New York Knicks take the East. I think it's Knicks in 26. I think this is the year we finally get that parade down Wall Street in the Canyon of Heroes and Jalen Brunson walking around with the Finals MVP. You could call it homerism, but I root it in fact.
Listen, I've been rooting for that the last couple of years simply because I want to see what New York is like if the Knicks are in the finals. I need to see that.
Did you see what it was like when we knocked Boston out the finals at the conference semifinals? I was there, okay? Like the moment OG Anunoby hit a 3, it's the third quarter. They go up by 40 points and they start singing New York, New York in Madison Square Garden. It was euphoric. And then you stepped outside of that arena. There's a giant Nike billboard like outside of MSG on 32nd Street. People were climbing it. Cops were screaming on their air horn. There was just pandemonium happening, and cops were encouraging it. They were getting in on it. They're Knicks fans too. I truly, truly fear for the city if the New York Knicks win an NBA championship. I've seen what they've done when they've won games and when they've won series. The NBA Cup, didn't really hit the same. But if they win the NBA championship this year, batten down the hatches, New York City is going to be a war zone in all the best ways.
And I think that would be good for basketball. And I also think it'd be good for basketball to get to see Victor Wembanyama in the finals. Could you imagine? I'm here for that pick. Well, thank you so much for joining the show today, Kaz. This has been so much fun. We'll see if your finals predictions come true in the coming months, weeks, whatever. The NBA playoffs is like so long. But thank you so much for joining me today. And thank you guys for watching another week of Revolt Sports Weekly. Make sure you subscribe to Revolt Sports on YouTube and follow us on social media so you can be a part of the conversation. Bye.